a lot about joined up approach and feeding into that, but I don't see any evidence of this. So we know, for example, in Wales, it's legislated for. There's an act that actually works across all public sector bodies, not just government, all public sector bodies, holding them accountable for what they're doing, and that's directly linked to the SDGs. So, Oliver, can I ask you, first of all, are you going to bring in such an act in England?
Well, I've seen the Welsh example. I don't actually think we need to have an Act of Parliament because we are already entrenching it through the single departmental plans, and I think that's the correct approach. I think you raised an important point about arm's length bodies. Certainly from the Cabinet Office perspective, we are ensuring that the arm's length bodies that we work with are aware of the goals and are entrenching it through the activities that they undertake. And it's as part of the single departmental plan process. That doesn't just relate to the department narrowly, that relates to the SDP describes what's expected both of the department but also the arm's length bodies which are accountable to that department. I think that's the best way to go. I'm open to the argument, clearly it wouldn't be my decision, but I'm open to the argument as to having a new piece of legislation, but I'm struggling to see what exactly it would add beyond what we're doing.
I mean, this piece of legislation is widely acclaimed across the world, including from the UN itself. You know, in terms of, we've yet to see it, it's a new piece of legislation, we've yet to see the outcomes on the ground from that, but all evidence suggests that it will lead to domestic outcomes. So those key changes that are happening in our communities. How else do you think? You know, everything you're saying is very top level, and it all depends on the individual ministers in the individual departments and how well they do at cross-working.
Well, I mean, I would say in respect of the single departmental plans, there's a sort of top-line summary which is published for each department. Actually, sitting underneath that are incredibly detailed plans running to dozens of pages, as I think other ministers here will attest, which get that level of granularity as to what's expected of departments, and the themes of the Sustainable Development Goals run through the activities of departments.
But how do you see that leading to outcomes on the ground?
Well, because the single departmental plans are basically the sort of I don't want to say contract, but the deal. They're the reporting mechanism for departments for what they and their arm's length bodies are actually going to deliver. There's a system of accountability because they're signed off and agreed by the Treasury. Their departmental funding is contingent upon delivering is allocated according to the needs identified in the single departmental plan, and overall departmental delivery, as scrutinised by Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. One of the principal tools, in fact, the principal tool we use is the single departmental plan, and departments have to report annually on the delivery of that. So I think it is it's a strong accounting mechanism, and my concern is that we don't have another mechanism that sits on top of that. I think it makes sense to have one reporting and accounting mechanism. That's why the coalition government introduced the predecessor of single departmental plans, the business plans, that to actually bring that focus to departments. It's working bringing that focus. The challenge we have is then ensuring that the single department, the Sustainable Development Goals, are entrenched in the single departmental plans. And as I hope you've seen with this year's single departmental plan, there's a lot of evidence of that now.
I mean, it seems to me that that's not working, and it's not working on the ground. It's not working with arm's length bodies, and it's not working across wider civic society. But can I ask Lord Bates as well? There are 7 months now until the UK Voluntary National Review has to be completed. How far along is that? You know, we're hearing evidence telling us that organisations have seen very little progress so far.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of work which is going on across Whitehall, as you would imagine. You're at this point, so everything is on progress towards meeting that deadline that we intend to publish.
Okay, and when are you going to report on that?
Well, the actual timetabling as to when we do this, we must send across the main messages from the voluntary national review by about mid-May, about 17th of May, and then it's formally presented
to Parliament?
No, it's formally presented to the UN. UN Sustainable Development Goals.
It to Parliament.
So there must be a way. I mean, the UN guidance suggests that parliamentarians need to be consulted on this. How is it coming to Parliament?
Well, that is, I mean, how we're looking at the present time at the possibility of an event. We'd be open to your advice on this as to how we actually engage with Parliament. There will be engagement with Parliament. The exact format of that is something that we are open to and discussing. But in terms of the actual process of this, then it is mid-May, initial messages, then the presentation in mid-June at the UN as the formal process to it. Then there's a feedback mechanism, and then a review in September at a high-level political forum in the margins of the UNGA. So I think those are all kind of points there. I've mentioned about the civil society element of it. I mentioned about how we're engaging with business on this, and of course devolved administrations. I've touched upon that, and Parliament. Again, if the committee was to make suggestions, I know the IDC are also looking at this. We'd be open to looking as to how that best takes place.
Oliver, would you like to comment on that? Will you be bringing it to Parliament?
I should say that DFID is the lead department for the Sustainable Development Goals. So if it's going to be brought to Parliament, it would be by the...
You're responsible for the domestic implementation, are you not?
The Cabinet Office is responsible for all implementation.
Yeah.
Sustainable Development Goals are one of the things that we're seeking to implement in the way I've described them, to entrench them. On the point about the voluntary national review, well, I'm quite sure that parliamentarians will want to debate and discuss that, and the government would facilitate opportunities for that to happen. But also,
before
we
May,
are
obviously.
Well, I think we would have to have a discussion with DFID as to the mechanisms for doing that, but I don't think we have any principled objections.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is something that we're in the process, not quite ready yet, to go out and sort of talk to...
You've got 7 months left, you're not ready. I mean, the UKSSD says it's unclear what the scope and process for engaging stakeholders will be in detail. We're not aware of preparations, mechanisms, or a reporting process, and nor are we.
There are some specifics on here. If you're talking about the stakeholders, I've already talked about the stakeholders that we are engaging with actively at the moment. There's also an obligation which is communicated to departments to consult the stakeholders in their area about the implication of the SDGs. So that is a commitment as well. We're aware of the commitment to engage with Parliament, and we will be doing that. The exact format of doing that is currently being working on, but because we're working on it and haven't announced it, it's also an opportunity for colleagues in Parliament to express a view as to how that, what form and what shape that should take.
And indeed, I should add, we clearly will be listening to the recommendations made by this committee.
But you didn't ask us to do this. We're doing this off our own bat. I mean, it sounds to me like you don't know what you're doing with parliamentarians. You're just going to wait and see. We've got 7 months left before this thing is reported to the UN.
Yes, I mean, I think that what we're saying is that there will be some engagement with Parliament, and the exact format of that. But for it to be a meaningful...
Perhaps commit to just coming back to Parliament on this before May, I think, Oliver, if you can do that.
I mean, I don't want to be bureaucratic about this.
As a Cabinet Office, I'm sure you could make that commitment.
The DFID is the lead department on this, so I'm afraid you can't ask me to make a commitment on behalf of another.
If I could just kind of sort of make the commitment, therefore, on behalf of the team of ministers present, it is that there will be a mechanism for consulting parliamentary colleagues on our progress towards a voluntary national review. That will happen before May. The exact format and structure as to how that consultation takes place is something which we are discussing in government, as you would expect, but we are also open to other colleagues in Parliament making suggestions to us.
So can I just, to follow that up, obviously the deadline you've set yourself is May to go back to to go to the UN with this voluntary review. I would imagine then, as UK government, you're involving what Wales is doing and what Scotland is doing, Northern Ireland, as a contingent. So you will be including in your evidence the Act for Future Generations.
Well, we are.
That's part of your.
On the specifics of the Act, I'm afraid I don't have a kind of position on that. It's fairly new. We'll look at that.
It's part of the UK and UK government.
Well, of course, we're consulting, as I mentioned before, with the devolved administrations on areas which are their responsibility, because we want to, project an accurate picture of what is happening in the UK. That is what is happening in Wales, which is part of the UK, and therefore it will be naturally part of presenting what the UK is doing to implement the SDGs, which is the purpose of the Voluntary National Review. So I think all of that is clear. The specific on the format of engagement is something which, as I said, we are discussing amongst colleagues who allow us to do that, and we are open to others making suggestions to us, but it will happen.
Can I ask the other ministers, Mr Tomlinson, Mr Rutley, what contributions your department made to the Voluntary National Review?
We'll be making submissions. I was speaking to some of the officials yesterday. They're gearing up in terms of their activity and liaising very closely